All right. It's Alexander Lawrence, the Portable Infinite from Los Angeles. Let's see. Let me get to this page here. I'm here with Midge Ure, Ultravox, a bunch of bands. Let's see. Okay, I'm looking for my page here. Okay, so yeah, Midge Ure, he has announced a North American tour that's going to kick off at Daryl's house in Pawling, New York, August 7th. The gig's called Dubbed Box Band in a Box will take Midge across North America and back, and it ends in Fort Lauderdale, September 12th. So it's going to be August and a little bit of September. LA, he'll be here at Zebulon. It's kind of a hipster place. It's kind of a new place. He's like Midge has played like the El Rey a couple times, I think.
That's right.
Where else did you play here in
Oh
LA?
God, back in the day, the Whiskey was the place to play. I think Ultravox, we did 5 nights at the Whiskey.
Oh yeah,
And then we were out in Pasadena and stuff. So for a band who didn't tour America a lot, we actually did quite a few shows. So it was good, but at this level, it's kind of difficult to find the right venues. So I don't know what Zebulon's like. You said it's kind of
well,
hipster.
yeah, it's kind of hipster play. I mean, Robin Hitchcock has played there, but it's not. It's more like real experimental band. So it's kind of an interesting uh place for you to play. I think. I mean, the other places like you're playing the Coach House in San Juan Capistrano. That's not a shocker. And then the Casbah in San Diego on the August 31st. That's. I mean, yeah, I could see you playing there too. Uh,
Yeah, no, I've done those venues before. I've done the Coach House many times. It's a great venue. Works really well and lovely people who run it as well. So yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back.
well, I think a lot of people here in America don't know that you were in Slick because we didn't really. I don't even think the record was released in America. And then Rich Kids. Then you played live with Thin Lizzy, and then Visage, and then the second version of Ultravox. I mean, when there was that story when you were doing Slick, where you were kind of like you working at a music shop or something? Because there was that story where you kind of met Bernie Rhodes and Malcolm McLaren and stuff, and you were the guy because I mean now they have like SIR and stuff, but you know there's like independent guys in New York and LA that just drop off like a Fender Twin or an Ampeg bass cabinet or something for bands to play shows. Were you that guy in Glasgow or wherever?
No, I wasn't that guy, but I was walking out one of those places. I was walking out a music shop in Glasgow when I was stopped by. This is back in 1975. It must have been something like that, or early '76, and I was stopped by Bernie Rhodes, who went on to manage the Clash, of course. But none of us knew that at the time, and he stopped me because of how I looked. He didn't really know if I was a musician or not, and he asked me to speak to his friend round the corner, sitting in the car, and his friend was Malcolm McLaren. It was quite a strange sight to behold in Glasgow in those days, and Malcolm told me about his shop in London and how he had looked after the New York Dolls and Vivienne Westwood and designing stuff, and he said he was putting a band together, and he asked me if I wanted to join the band, but he didn't ask me what I did. So I said, no. What kind of band is that? You don't stop someone in the street and say, well, you look good, we'll get you in it. And the reality was, and I told Steve Jones this a couple of years ago on his radio show. The reality is that they were driving all the way up to Scotland from London, which is like a 400-mile drive, stopping off at all the main cities on the way, selling slightly hot equipment from the back of the car. And my great line is that I didn't join the Pistols, but I bought an amplifier. So they were a couple of rogues, really, these guys. But yeah, I went on to manage the Clash, and then Malcolm finally put together the right guys for the Pistols.
Yeah. Well, I mean, well, since you were in so many bands, I mean, you were like working at a music shop, and then you just kind of joined Slick. Slick was kind of there was like, and it was more like the Monkees. It was kind of like there was independent songwriters, and they just kind of had to get the right looking guys to fit into the band. And then Rich Kids was more like a new wave band, and then Thin Lizzy's like heavy rock. I mean, what were you looking to do back then? Because like this is like a wider range, from almost like a boy band to new wave to heavy metal. Like what were you looking to do back then in the 70s?
Well, the slick thing was a band. It was an actual band. It wasn't a made up put together thing.
Oh,
We toured the Scottish circuit for quite a while, but back then there was no infrastructure in Scotland. If you were a Scottish band, there was no independent
right.
labels, no recording facilities, no management, nothing. And we were offered a record deal, and of course the record deal was, which we didn't realise until we travelled down to London to make our first record. The record deal was the songs were written by the same guys as the Bay City Rollers and produced by those guys as well. We turned up to make a record, and the session guys had been in that morning and knocked off the backing track. We were tarred with that brush. I joined the Pistols. I joined Glenn Matlock from the Pistols. So I didn't join the Pistols. I joined his new band, the Rich Kids. Sheer luck, I suppose. And I bought a synthesizer in 1978 and introduced it to the Rich Kids, thinking about merging this synthesizer, this electronic thing, with a pop band, a rock band, guitars, bass, and drums. And it split the band up. So I took the half the band who liked it, and we formed a studio project called Visage, with Steve Strange fronting it, and all of our favourite musicians from different bands, all making up the band Visage. So we had the guys from the band Magazine, and we had Billy Curry, keyboard player from Ultravox, who were still in existence at the time. And I wanted to produce, so I produced the Visage album and watched Ultravox come back from an American tour, a broken band. John had left, the singer had left, the guitarist had left. They were dropped by the record label, and I joined that band.
Yeah, well, 70. What I'm getting at is like 79 seemed like a real weird period because punk rock kind of came and went, and then there was a lot of guys hanging around looking for something to do. So you were one of those guys, like that just was ready to join anything that was like.
No, no, absolutely not. If you what I just said there, came out a teeny bop band, and
Yeah.
I joined Glenn Matlock, original Sex Pistol, 1977. Introduced a synthesizer before other bands were using synthesizers into the Rich Kids, hoping that that would transform the Rich Kids into something more like Ultravox.
Oh, right.
And Thin Lizzy was a sideline. I'd already joined Ultravox at the time, and nobody was interested in Ultravox. They thought they were dead and gone. That's when I did the Thin Lizzy thing for a few months,
Oh,
and that enabled me to buy the equipment for Ultravox. But Ultravox was my band. That was the main thing.
that was bad. Well, what I'm saying is like there was guys from Magazine and like you said, and other bands that seemed like they were into collaboration at that time and looking to do some kind of. I mean, you're mentioning that you brought along the synth and tried to introduce that. It seemed like around that time, 79, 80, there was a lot of people looking to that were around. Maybe their bands weren't doing so hot, and they were looking to collaborate. Not specifically you.
I think there were a lot of musicians open to collaboration, but you have to remember that it was a bit of a, yes, you're right, mid '70s teeny bop pop, late '70s punk, late '70s, early '80s electronic. So it was changing rapidly. The whole musical landscape in the UK changed very, very quickly over a short space of time. And add to that the technological revolution that happened, where synthesizers, up until the Japanese manufacturers started making them, cost a fortune. Nobody could afford a synthesizer. So all of a sudden, coming out of the punk ethos of, I can't really play a guitar, but I'll get one and I'll learn 3 chords and write some songs and I'll form a band, because that was the whole thing. Anyone can do it. It changed drastically to, I'll get a synthesizer and I'll make a record in my bedroom with a tape machine. So the technological revolution changed the whole landscape. And all of a sudden, electronics seemed to be the new toy. So lots of bands dropped their guitars and did it. Ultravox were a band who utilized electronics, but I'm a guitarist first and foremost, and that never ever left. What we did from those days on.
Yeah, I have this collection
Oh yeah,
here.
yeah.
This is on Chrysalis Records. It seemed like Chrysalis Records was known for Blondie and like the two-tone bands like the Specials and the
Yeah,
Selects.
Billy Idol and Pat Benatar and all of that stuff.
And I mean, how did you find Chrysalis? I mean, they had success with those other bands, and then so like Ultravox and some of the other things you were involved with, kind of. I mean, how did you find the environment of Chrysalis Records when you first did the first Ultravox record?
Well, Chrysalis was like most labels at the time. It was a label of two halves. You know, the American side, who did all the Billy Idol and Pat Benatar and much more American sounding music, and they had the UK side, who was signing Spandau Ballet and Ultravox and whatever. You just said the two tone things. So it was a label divided, and Ultravox just were never going to fit into the musical landscape of America at the time, because college radio would play us, and the coasts would play us. So you get WLIR in Long Island, or you'd get 91X or K Rock or whatever in California playing us, and stations like that. But a handful of stations were being radical and playing what was coming out of the UK at the time. Whereas the majority of America, when I turned up in America the first time in 1979, you had radio stations that played nothing but Stairway to Heaven. You know, you still had Styx in Boston and Foreigner and, Poodle Rock and, all of that stuff going on. So we were never going to fit into that system really, and it took a long time for it to change.
Yeah, yeah. Here's the record. Yeah, yeah. I grew up listening to it on K Rock here in LA. Like they definitely played like Quiet Men, and then they played Vienna and Sleepwalk on it, like Rodney on the Rock, or
Yeah,
just on
yeah,
the radio. So I wanted to mention Chris Cross died recently. I mean, back in high school, like Ultravox, that period, the kind of the John Fox and the Midge Ure period, like Ultravox was one of my favorite bands back then. So like yeah, so I remember that time vividly. And then when you came over and played a bunch of times, and I actually you did like a record store thing, like maybe 82 over here at Camel Records, which is about a mile where I'm from right now. But I remember you coming over playing the Cuckoo's Nest and the Whiskey and the Santa Monica Civic and
yeah. We did all of that, and it was because we had so much technology in what we did, because we refused to mime or use backing tracks or backing tapes or anything. We could only do our own concerts. We could only do our own shows. So we worked our way up through, the Ritz in New York and all of that stuff, and we ended up at like the Avery Fisher Hall in New York. So we ended up in 2.5, 3,000 capacity venues. Then the next logical thing, if you wanted to carry on and try and work your way through America a bit more, was to open up for someone else. Well, we couldn't, because our sound checks.
yeah.
This is pre-MIDI, pre any machines talking to any other machines. Our sound checks took 5 hours. So technically we couldn't open up for anyone else. So we just stalemated. So after 2 or 3 tours of America, we just called it a day.
Yeah. There's bands like today, like Ladytron, who use like the old analog stuff. I mean, when they tour America, they have like four ARPs or something, and
Yeah.
two of them are at the shop, and then because they're always breaking down and stuff. So yeah, people don't realize that when you use these old analog synthesizers, usually they're always breaking down.
Yeah, they go out of tune if you're playing a hot, sweaty club. The oscillators are also, you've got to tune it up in between every song, and it was interesting. It was a real baptism by fire, but great fun.
So let me ask you about Chris Cross. I mean, he just died recently. I mean, can you talk about a little bit about the kind of
Sure.
person? I mean, he was like the only London member of the band, right?
Yeah, yeah. Chris was it was a real shock because he was a fit and healthy guy, and it was an aneurysm, so he didn't know anything about it. He just didn't wake up one day. And while he was around, there was always the essence of maybe we could get together and make another album or something. Maybe we could go and write together or do a film soundtrack or something. But now that he's gone, I think that's made that impossible. He brought art to the band. He worked together with me, directing the videos, photography. He introduced us to Peter Saville, who did all the artwork, for the early albums. He brought much more than just music to the band, and it was a real sad moment. Not just that I'm 70 now, so not just at your age where your contemporaries are starting to, fall off the edge of the planet, but when your friends start falling off the edge of the planet, it's really quite frightening. So I think what I've taken from the downside of all of that, the miserable side of that actually happening, is actually enjoying every moment that I have. And what I enjoy doing most is exactly this, is performing and talking about performing and writing. I'm sitting in my studio right now, just creating. So I have a newfound enthrallment of all of that. Sometimes that, as you well know, you're obviously a musician, you've got a guitar in the background there. As you well know, it can be like painting by numbers sometimes, playing the same songs over and over and over. So I found a newfound enthusiasm for what I'm doing.
So Ultravox, you guys did do a reunion about 10 years ago or so. I mean, was that, so that was like the final thing? It's like, I watched a little documentary about it, and so that's pretty much it. That was like the last thing you'll do as Ultravox, you think?
I think so. That was probably the last hurrah. Yeah, we didn't intend to do it. We had left Ultravox hanging. When I said I was leaving and I didn't want to do it anymore, I wasn't enjoying it towards the end. I think the last album we made back in 85, 86, whatever it was very confused. It was a very confused record. And not their fault, my fault as well. We were all pulling in different directions like bands do. And had we ridden it out, we may have pulled it all back together again. But at the time, it just seemed like, oh God, Live Aid had just happened, and I just had a solo record, and I thought, this is so much easier just going and doing a solo thing and walking away from it and starting again. And we'd left it unfinished. It was just dangling. So we were all approached 10, 12 years ago, asking if we'd be interested in possibly doing some dates, to celebrate. I think it was something like the 30 or 40th anniversary of Vienna, whatever that happened to be. And weirdly, we all said yes, even though we hadn't played together for 25 years, 30 years. And it was an interesting process. But the more interesting thing was that after all that time apart, after we had toured the old stuff, we started talking like you do about, do you think we could maybe write something new? And that spark was still there. That creativity was still there. And I've no idea how that happens. I mean, you've experienced this, obviously. You get in a room with someone, nothing. You get in a room with someone else, and instantly the ideas are flowing, and and it was just that. So we ended up making our final album 10 years ago, I think, called Brilliant. And I'm very proud of it. It was a great way to kind of double underline, this is how we're leaving it now, not just hanging in midair.
Yeah, great. And I mean, a lot of people I've interviewed, they usually had memoir or some kind of book coming out kind of at the same time. But you do have sort of this autobiography that came out maybe 2005, If I Was.
Yeah.
When did why did you write that then? I mean, and
ego.
okay.
Because someone said, we'd like to write a book about you. And this stupid thing is, you go, oh, that could be interesting, until you start the process and you realize that you're uncovering things you don't really want to uncover again. all the bad bits are still there. All those horrible memories you got to rake over again and start the embers burning. So it was an interesting process, but not a pleasant process doing it, because you have to be. I decided to be brutally honest about everything. I know I preempted the reading of the book. I did a foreword just saying, if an incident an incident happens in a room with 100 people in it, you're going to get 100 different interpretations of what happened, and this is my interpretation of what happened. It's because memory does weird things to you. You're convinced things happened. Of course, I went and spoke to everyone that I talked about, and I'd go and sit with Chris, or I'd sit with Billy, or I'd sit with Warren, and say, "Can you remember what it was like when we worked at Connie Plank's place the first time in Germany?"
All right.
And so I seem to remember it was this, and you go, "Well, it was that, but we did that." And you go, "Oh God, of course we did, yeah," and it comes back. So I kind of did as much groundwork as I could, so I could get it as right as I could.
Yeah, almost 20 years has gone by since you wrote this book. Is there going to be like a second edition, or some new chapters, or you think, or you're kind of leaving it off? That's it.
Well, I think again that involves getting it right. That involves a serious bit of hard work and remembering what's going on the last 20 years. I suppose these days you have a computer, you have everything on a diary. You've got all the emails, you've got all the stuff that you can actually refer to. Whereas prior to that, it's just memory. I didn't write anything down. I didn't keep diaries. Any of that stuff. So it's not an impossibility, because a lot of interesting things have happened over the last 20 years. A lot of stuff that you couldn't if you were sitting down trying to write how your future would unfold, you couldn't write things as ridiculous as what have kind of happened to me. So yeah, those things might come to be written down at some point.
You mentioned Connie Plank. If there's, I mean, producers that musicians would want to work with in the last 40, 50 years. Connie Plank, Brian Eno, George Martin. Those are some of and you got to work with most of these guys. So what was that like? Those are like pretty heavy producers. Those are the guys. Those are like anyone's top 10 producers. Definitely George Martin and Connie Plank.
Yeah, well, all brilliant in their own right. All of them brilliant in their own right, but all radically different. You know, uh, Prior to me joining Ultravox, Ultravox had recorded one album with Connie Plank, and the sound of that album was amazing. It's a brilliant sounding record, I think called Systems of Romance. And when I joined the band, we were talking about, who should we get to do the next one, and I would say, well, I want to work with Connie. I'd love to work. I want to see, because I was a geek. I wanted to be in the studio. I wanted to produce, and therefore I wanted to see how he did things. So we ended up working with Connie again on a couple of albums, and then it was time to move on, time to try something different, and George Martin was suggested to us. We were kind of unsure because nobody was quite sure of how George would have kept up with technology. We were a geeky band who liked things that light up and make funny noises and stuff. And we didn't know if George would be up to scratch. We knew musically he was spectacular. We knew he was he was the antithesis of Connie. Connie never got involved in the music at all. Never commented on it unless it was an observation. He never said, "Oh, that should be a B flat," or "That take that F out of there," or whatever it happened to be. George was the opposite. George would say, "Right, stand round the piano, guys. Let's work this out. Why are you going round in these ever increasing circles at the end section? You've kind of said what you need to say." And he would edit things, and there aren't many producers that Ultravox, certainly Billy in Ultravox, who was the classical musician, would listen to. So when George Martin suggests something, you listen. You'd be an idiot not to. So very radically different producers, but both amazing in their own way.
Yeah, Connie Plank. I was reading some stuff. He didn't he live like on a farm, and
Yeah.
So out of the city a little bit.
Yeah.
So you kind of moved into the farm there and
Well,
ate
I mean,
meals together.
we could have lived at it. So it was a farmhouse, and one of the barns he had converted into a studio, and it was a very Germanic studio, very almost hippie-ish in its own way. You know, lots of things hanging off the walls, and nothing like a posh, you know, upmarket studio. But it was Connie's, and it was full of his electronic toys that he built. These things, these little boxes that he'd plug things into, and you weren't quite sure what he was doing. So they were either compressing or distorting or whatever, but it all handmade because he was a computer geek. He was this audio technician, and when you worked at his place, you didn't have, you know, cell phones. You didn't have a mobile phone. You didn't have television you could watch. You know, you were absolutely engrossed in what you were doing because you're living in a farmyard in the middle of Germany, 30 kilometers away from the nearest city, with no transportation. So it was great in many respects. I mean, the Vienna album, we finished it there. We finished it. We mixed it to Connie's, I think, did some overdubs there. But the follow-up album, Rage in Eden, we recorded the entire album in his studio. We went to the studio with no songs, no ideas, just our equipment, and we created the entire thing from scratch in his studio. Thanks to the success of Vienna, we could afford to do that. And it was an experiment, and it was an amazing thing because it captured an essence and an atmosphere that you couldn't have gotten anywhere else. It had to be Connie's place in his house, his rules, you know, that kind of thing. It was his baby. And the weird thing is that when we took him out of that environment and we took him to Air Studios in Montserrat, you know, beautiful big SSL desk and whatever, it was like a fish out of water. He felt really uncomfortable. It was too clean. It was too clinical. It wasn't his. So we realized we'd made a mistake when we did that.
What about that Vienna video? I was watching it like a couple days ago. It didn't really make much sense to me. Was that all like just the director Russell McKay, or was there like kind of like a story there, or you know, just
Not really. I mean, it was Russell. Russell was cutting his teeth as a director. I mean, he was actually I think he was an editor to start with, and we had insisted on shooting a promo on film, 16mm film, which was his genre. And we kind of let him loose. Once we'd explained to him that he kept talking about gondolas and canals, and once we explained to him that that's Venice, not Vienna, he's Australian after all, he just kind of went off on one. He was brilliant with kind of soundbite images, just little images, these little, you know, cameo moments, and glued them all together. It didn't have to have a storyline. It had to have a look. And it's something I learned much later on when I was directing videos. I'd make a linear story. And of course, in the UK, we had no vehicle to show a 4-minute long video. You'd go on television and they'd say, well, let's see a bit of your video. And they'd show a 30-second clip, which didn't make any sense whatsoever. So I realized that by making a look and a feel on the video, you could show 30 seconds and people would actually, they'd recognize what that was about. It was set in Vienna, it was dark, it was moody, it was atmospheric, it was shot in film, you know, all of those elements. So yeah, it wasn't meant to make any real sense.
okay. So you did at Royal Albert Hall. You did a 70th anniversary show last year. I mean, why did you do that? What was going on there?
Well, again, I just finished the UK tour for that year, and earlier in the year, my agent had said, "Look, it's your 70th birthday coming up. What do you want to do? Do you want to do something, anything? Do you want to celebrate it?" And I said, "Well, if we're going to do something, go big or don't go at all. Don't do it." And of course, after lockdown, where everything was postponed and pushed back for 18 months, everyone who had booked a slot in the Albert Hall had taken up their new slots. So he came back and said, there's nothing for 2 years. It's completely booked out. And then something fell out 4 days before my birthday. And he said, do you want to do it? And we said, yeah. So we had to go back into rehearsals and polish it all up and go in there and expand the show and all of that stuff to do this birthday celebration. But the amazing thing about the Albert Hall, I don't know if you've ever been there, it's a glorious place. It's not the best sounding place in the world. It was designed for people to make speeches in back in Victorian times with no amplification. So it can be a little lively, a little echoey. But we got there and we did this, and people had flown in from all over the world to come there and celebrate my birthday. And it was one of those evenings where you could do no wrong. You could do nothing wrong. Whatever you did was going to be great. So we had an absolute ball. I mean, a fantastic memory to have.
Just a reminder, Midge Ure is doing an American tour starting August 7th. It's called Band in the Box. So what is this? What is Band in the Box? It's a duo, and you're going to be playing across America. What can you describe? What should people expect when they come to see Band in the Box?
Band in a Box came about because Howard Jones had asked me to open up for him on his tour 2 years ago around America. And I had to explain to him that I didn't do quite as financially well in America as he did. So therefore, I couldn't tour with a full-blown band. And I came up with a concept. He said, well, we said, if I use one of your keyboard players and I'll program some drums and some synth bass, and I'll play keyboards, he can play keyboards, I'll play guitar, he plays keyboards, I'll sing, he plays keyboards, so just two people on stage, and the rest of it is a band in a box. So I was kind of reticent about doing it, thinking in the back of my mind, it still felt like cheating, people waiting to see a band and they're seeing half a band. But it enabled me to play a lot of the stuff from the Ultravox days and some of the stuff from the Visage days and some of the stuff that I couldn't really do in an acoustic format on my own. And people loved it. So at the end of the tour, I said, well, I'll come back and do it again sometime. This is that time.
And you'll be at Zebulon on August 30th. Everyone should show up and buy a bunch of merch and stuff. If people want to get your book or listen to your music, they should go to midgeure.com. Is that where people should go?
There's an audio version of the book. I narrated the book in an audio form. Where you would find an actual hardback or paperback copy, I think you're probably better on eBay or something. I have no idea.
So, if you want to, all the information's there at midgeure.com, Midge Ure Co. UK. I'll put a description in the link. I think that's all my questions. I just wanted to ask you about Chrysalis Records. I mean, do you? I asked this for a bunch of musicians. I mean, do you own your masters? Do you have all the publishing and all that, or with all
No,
your bands?
we don't own the masters. Again, it's something that if we felt strongly enough about it, we'd go back and get it and negotiate getting it. In those days, when you signed a record deal back in the late 70s, early 80s, you didn't expect to own your masters. There aren't many businesses in the world where someone would say, well, we will lend you the money to build your car, but then we'll own the car, and then you have to pay us back for every car you sell until we've paid back the loan. So the music industry does that. It's a very, very odd concept. So yeah, back in the day when we signed, there was no clauses in there about having to make videos. And in fact, we had to fight to make the Vienna video and whatever. We had to do it ourselves and then get them to pay for it later once they saw the video. Within a year, and MTV starting to arrive, contracts changed, and they insisted that videos had to be made because it all changed. So contracts back then, no, you didn't expect to own your masters.
But do you have control when it seems like Chrysalis can just kind of pump out one of these greatest hits like every couple of years, and they do you control the mixes, and like when it comes out, do they?
We do. We've been doing some box sets recently with a lot of remixes and remasterings. In fact, there's a new one coming out in a few weeks' time. Moby's done a remix on it. A lot of people who were inspired by Ultravox back in the day, who loved bought synthesizers because of it and stuff. And we're involved in that because they do them unbelievably well. They don't just try and rake in cash. They actually spend money doing the graphics and the artwork and packaging these things unbelievably well, and not asking the earth for them when they sell them. So they're kind enough to run it past us, but they don't have to. It's they own it. They can do what they like. But I think the right way to go forward in this stuff, if you're going to reissue stuff, speak to the artist, because they're everyone wants their work heard. Nobody's going to try and stop it, but you want it done tastefully.
Well, people, Ultravox and Midge Ure have been responsible for like 40 plus years of music to come after it. I mean, they is maybe not known to everybody, but like they're all people are always ripping these guys off.
I'm glad you said that.
There's always because even Gary Newman was a big Ultravox fan, and he got, he definitely lifted a lot from Systems of Romance, at least. And in other bands, a lot, people like my age, we all grew up with Visage and, Ultravox and a lot of these bands and stuff. And they were played in the clubs and on the radio and stuff. And it's, maybe in America, Ultravox doesn't get much attention because it didn't, it wasn't, like maybe the radio guy just didn't like the way you looked or something, or it's like, they didn't like, they liked Dave Gahan, but they didn't like Midge Ure. So whatever. Okay. Well, thanks for talking to me. It's been a great, glorious day. Go see him. Check out midgeure.com. Zebulon, the Coach House, late August. The shows are in August and part of September, and we'll see you on Daryl's house too. That'll be pretty exciting too.
That's good fun there.
Have you done that before?
I have. I've done it a few times. Yeah, it's great. Great sound, guys. Great, lovely venue.
Okay, well well, thanks for talking to me. Let's end it. That's it. Bye.
Thank you very much.
See you soon.
See you. Bye.